Good evening, good day, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Ask Abhijit show. I hope you're all doing great. So, today I'm going to take questions from the live chat that's going on right now, and that's from which I will take the questions. Lots happening in the world right now, lots happened in the past, so I'm sure there's a lot of questions. Let me see who all is there in the live stream. I can see Raghuvir Solanki, Sujit Shanagonda, Uma Maheshwari, G. Karthikeyan, Winter Rangers, Wolf, Pranay Paul, Zubong Izang, Raj Animish, Avik Banerjee, Skywatch, Alan J. Victor, Gaurav Singh, Mohit Parashar, Paritosh, Rahul Dunake, that only 1678, Satish Chauhan, Shashank Kaushik, Madhav Chigurupati, Ashish RSI, Tanya Bachar, Nabadita Das, Chetan K, Avinash, Gautami, Bitupan Bora, Ratnesh Palia, Arijit, Vivek Singh, Naushil, Sony, Gaurav Arora, Random Skull, DBZ, Natsu, XY, Zedmas, Harshay, Milton Chandra, Netizen, Krishna Mitram, Varun Singh, Malik, Pawan Kumar Singh, Samana Satish, Inia, Brijesh SK, Dr. Suryakant Agar, Chetan Aradhya, Prachand 369, Anonymous, Geopolitical Dube, Milton Chandra, Harshay, Abhishek 47 Tyagi, Jawaharlal Chavda, Piyush Sharma, Krishna Mitram, Anmol, Prabal Narayan, Manisha Cardozo, Srivatsa, Anmol Kumar, Balaji KR, Trupti Patil, Fitness Science English, Practics Gamer, Kishan Jasani, Nothing Sigma, Ananda Bhattacharji, Priyanka Javalia, and everybody else. So, with that done, I'm going to stop greeting you all individually there. So, please go ahead. Ask your questions. I'll take as many as possible. Crazy Brain, I can see. Hello. So, what are the questions that we have? Um, Winter Rangers Wolf. Let's start with this one. Given that India was once divided into kingdoms, do you think post independence division into states like the European Union could have been a better development? The European Union, again, is like one country. You see, none of the states are fully sovereign. They all have some shared sovereignty, pooled sovereignty, and the real power, the real decision making ability, the policy framing ability, all that lies in Brussels. It resides in Brussels. So, and most of the EU states, if not many of them, many of the EU states, nations, are members of NATO. So that's where you have pooled military capabilities. So it's kind of like the same thing. And why should we have? What was the point? What would have been the point of us dividing ourselves into separate nations and then creating a confederation or a union like the EU? It makes sense to be together, all of us, doesn't it? Because at the end of the day, we are that would be the same kind of thing actually, with a little more coherence in a nation state. So I think what we've done is right. We are a nation state. We should aspire to once again becoming a civilization state, and to, well, regain the status that we historically always have had. Okay. Indrajit says, when will India start playing with the US the way they do with us? And the PM is visiting the US next month. Do you think he's gonna do at once what US diplomats are doing here with the opposition? So the question is, when will India start playing with the US? The way the US plays with India. In what way does the US play with India? It interferes in India's internal affairs. It did interfere in some ways, in a variety of ways, in the 2024 general elections by funding and promoting various influencers, so called academics, so called allegedly political parties, by indulging in subnational diplomacy. What does the US do? It engineers regime change operations in India's neighborhood. These are the things that the US does. Okay, these are the things that the US does. I'm sure I can list a whole lot more of what they do. They support a terrorist nation like Pakistan. They funded and financed Pakistani terrorism in India for decades, and much more. That's what the US does. When can India, first of all, does India want to play the same games with the US? Certain things we just don't do, right? We don't support terrorism. We don't do regime change operations. But let's say hypothetically India wanted to do that. Hypothetically. When could India be in a position to do that? Well, the answer is very simple. When India will be in a position to do the same things when India is as powerful as the US is right now, and when the US is as powerful as India is right now. The positions need to reverse for that to happen. So India would need to become a global superpower, and the US would have to become a small regional power. Then India would be in a position to play those games. Long, far away kind of scenario. Okay, it's not that easy. I mean, one does understand that when the Americans do these things, you feel emotional and you want a response, a strong response from the government of India and so on. You can have a strong response only if you have the actual capabilities to withstand what the retaliation could be like. Okay, so there's a big, gigantic difference between words and actions. You make some rash statements, harsh statements, which you cannot back up with hard power, then it's gonna bring a tremendous amount of blowback upon you. So every nation should know what its power is like, what its standing is like in the let's say the Committee of Nations, and you have to behave and act in a way that is proportional to the amount of power you have in the global arena. So India doesn't have a tremendous amount of power right now. Yeah, we have a gigantic population, largest population in the world. We have a large land area, etc. We have nuclear weapons and we have certain other things. But compared to what the US has, we are a minuscule, tiny little nation compared to the cumulative hard power of the US. So you don't play those games when you are in the situation that India is in right now. Okay? That's simply how it works. Okay, geopolitical Dubey says, what's cooking between Bharat and China? Well, right now we don't know what's cooking. We don't quite know what is cooking. Uh, Ever since the regime change operation that happened in East Pakistan, uh, and of course, also considering what's happening in Burma, the civil war that has been engineered and is currently raging in Burma, this overall situation, which is interconnected, it affects India as well as China, and it has significantly hampered China's plans for the region. And it doesn't make sense for India in the long run to allow the Americans to use us as a pawn on the geopolitical chessboard against China. Now, the Chinese want supremacy in Asia and globally, but they now hopefully understand that they are not going to achieve supremacy because of a number of reasons. First of all, their economy is no longer growing that fast. It's actually not growing well. Secondly, there's a demographic disaster that's pending. It's coming up for China. The total fertility rate has drastically declined. It's around 1 or 1.1, which is a disaster. It's a catastrophe. China is going to get old very rapidly. The average age, the median age of the average person in China is going to rise very rapidly. So China is going to get old before it gets rich. China is kind of on the lower fringes of the middle income nation status. And militarily, it's not that powerful. Sitting here in India, clearly China is way more powerful than India. It's about 3 times or almost 4 times more powerful than India. But compared to the US, China is that much tiny. The Americans, people don't understand how powerful the US military machine is. They can obliterate China on demand. So China faces this situation. The Americans are squeezing China from every side. The Americans can handle China's economy. The two economies are interdependent upon each other to a large extent. China is encircled. I mean, if you want to look at the map, where's the map? I'll show you the map. In what way is China encircled? Let me show you in what way China is encircled. So here we have China. To the west, to the east of China, we have Japan, which is an American possession. Then you have South Korea, again an American possession. Then you have the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand. All of these nations are kind of pro-US. Even Vietnam these days, considering the bullying the Chinese have been, trusting upon Vietnam. If the Chinese change their Vietnam policy, the Vietnamese may become more friendly. Then there are military bases like Guam, etc., which encircle China and which allow the Americans to project tremendous amount of power in the region. And then you have this nation called India, Bharat, which the Chinese have unnecessarily antagonized. So China is encircled, completely encircled. And now with the developments in Bangladesh, East Pakistan, and in Burma, China is even further encircled. So that's the situation. So it makes sense for the Chinese to kind of play to 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 make amends with India and cooperate with India, because India doesn't want war with China. India doesn't want a hostile situation with China. So, and yet the situation is that India cannot trust China right now. The way things stand, India is not in a position to trust China at all. The Chinese have played so many games that we won't trust them. So if India and China were to, let's say, work together in some way, the Chinese will have to convince India that they are worthy of trust. Now, how do you do that? How can the Chinese convince India that they are worthy of being trusted? That India can trust China? There's only one way of doing it: demarcate the border. Demarcate the border. Where's the border? This entire border that we see, India Tibet border, is actually undemarcated. If you are streaming or if you're opening the map from Google Maps from within India, it will show you the Indian version of the map. If you go to other countries and open the map from there, it will show you a different version of the map. It will show Aksai Chin as part of China, or kind of with dashed lines and all that. It will even try to claim that Arunachal Pradesh is disputed. That's what Google Maps will do. Even if I click here, it says unavailable, even though Arunachal Pradesh is very much part of India. If I click within Nepal, it will say whatever place, Nepal. But in Arunachal, it will say unavailable. So that's the deal. So the entire border is undemarcated thanks to China. The Chinese have steadfastly refused to demarcate the India-Tibet border. So if China wants Bharat to feel that we can trust China to a certain extent, they have to first sit down with India at the negotiating table and rapidly demarcate the border, not just on the map, but also on the ground. Very clear demarcation, no ambiguity, no nonsense. Then things may work going forward. It's going to be a very lengthy step-by-step process. Okay. And the onus, if the Chinese want cooperation with India, the onus is entirely on the Chinese for this to work, to make this work. So that's where we are. I don't know what's brewing between India and China. The Chinese seem to be sending certain signals to India. If you look at their social media signals, etc., they are kind of playing nice right now. But I don't know what it could indicate. I think it's early days. Maybe something may be brewing behind closed doors, but I cannot speculate about that. So that's where we are vis-a-vis India and China. Okay. Summit statement. Okay, interesting question. How to achieve anything you want? How to stay motivated? What are the steps you are taking that look harder than others? First of all, you have to understand and realize that you cannot achieve everything that you want. There's going to be failures in life. Or you may be able to achieve things, but after multiple failures. That's also a possibility. So there is always the chance that you may not be able to accomplish or achieve every single thing that you want. That you have to realize, first of all. And you have to be okay with that. If you encounter a failure along the road, you cannot let it break you. You got to dust it off and move on. That's what you have to do. First of all, what do I mean by that? You have to be resilient. You need to be mentally really tough. Because life is going to throw all kinds of stuff at you. That's a guarantee. Okay? The most successful people are the ones who have failed the most. And the most successful people, they haven't achieved everything they wanted, but they achieved great success at whatever they're famous for or they are good at, and so on. So how do you achieve? With that understood, how do you achieve what you, let's say you have a number of things that you want to achieve. So you first of all write it down on a piece of paper. I want to achieve these things in my lifetime. So first you make a list of things that you want to achieve in your lifetime. Then you ask yourself, in what time period do I want to achieve these things? The ones that can be achieved before, you can work on them before. After you make a bucket list, you have to ask yourself which are non-negotiable and which are expendable. So you may have a whole bucket list of 78 things you want to achieve, but then you have to ask yourself, are all of these 78 things really worthwhile? What are the top three things I want to do in my life, or top five? So you have to break it down like that. Then you have to have a 5 year wish list, then a 1 year wish list, and then you have to break down that 1 year wish list of like the top three things I want to achieve this year into small actionable steps. And then you have to have a calendar, write it down on the calendar. What am I going to do this week, this month, today, tomorrow, etc. And then you need to learn how to manage time and so on and so forth. And after doing all this, you have to execute as hard and as fast as you can and as smart as you can. So it's about prioritizing things and so on. And still you may not be able to succeed, because in anything that you do, typically many of the variables are out of your control. Let's say you want to win a gold medal in the next Olympics. So there are certain things in your control: how hard you train, your nutrition, your diet, your sleep patterns. But there are things you can't control. What kind of facilities can you afford? What kind of coaching can you afford? And even if you're really good, will the your local nations your nation's sports authorities, will they select you? Let's say you become really good, but will you be selected for the Olympics, or will there be some other hanky panky that you can't control? And then let's say you're selected for the Olympics, you go and compete. Let's say you're a boxer and you find that the Olympic Boxing Association is tremendously corrupt. Then you may do well, but you know the result is not in your hands. So there are so many things that you cannot control. So ideally, you want to have objectives and goals that have parameters and that you can mostly control. And in case you have things like you can't control, then you have to be okay with failure. And even if you can control everything, there is no guarantee of success, because you may not be that good, perhaps, or you may be even better. Who knows? You will not know until you try. And when you try, you fail many times. So that's how it is. So first of all, you have to be really resilient. You have to be smart. You have to identify objectives and tasks that you will genuinely be able to excel at, which means you have to understand yourself. And then the motivation has to come from within you. So that's kind of how we do it. Everybody will have a different path, a different way of doing it. And most people don't achieve greatness in life. Understand that. The people who achieve true greatness in life are the 0.1% of society, or maybe 0.01% of society. Most people, 95% of people, don't even want to be great. They may say that I want to be great and so on and so forth, but they are okay with being average. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Not everybody is going to be a great entrepreneur or a great industrialist or whatever. Most people are happy having a 9 to 5 job or 9 to 9 job or whatever it is, and getting a good salary and coming home and so on. So it all depends on so many things. But if you want to be in the top 0.01%, you have to work really hard. There's no holidays, there's no days off. And you need to be able to understand yourself and do the things that I kind of laid out. So that's kind of how it goes. Okay. So all the best. And I wish you great success. Okay. Sigma says thoughts on Machiavellism. Machiavelli was this Italian. Well, it's now part of Italy. So he was this guy who wrote this book called The Prince, right? The Prince. I think I had it once. Not sure. So I think someone stole that book from me. That's what people do. Never give anyone your book. Don't allow anyone to borrow your book. It will disappear. It typically disappears. So he wrote this book called The Prince. It's about statecraft. It's about realism, pragmatism, and so on and so forth. It's about how powerful people can gain power and stay in power and that sort of thing. And it is all about a very cutthroat view of the world, a very realistic, pragmatic, amoral view of the world. Amoral, not immoral, but amoral, which is all about the fact that power has nothing to do with ethics or morality. You either have power or you don't. So that's what the Prince is about, Machiavelli's book, and it is kind of a watered down version of the Arthashastra. I'm sure that there is nothing, no connection between the two. I'm sure that Niccolo Machiavelli did not have access to the Arthashastra, most likely, overwhelmingly most likely. But yeah, so in the West, they kind of term Vishnugupta Chanakya as the Indian Machiavelli, which is utter nonsense. Machiavelli lived in the Middle Ages, about I don't remember how many years before today, maybe about roughly 500 years before today, give or take. And Vishnugupta Chanakya lived 2000 years before that, so about 2000 roughly 2500 2400 years before today. And the Arthashastra is a much more detailed document and much more superior document compared to the Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. So now Machiavelli is considered in the West to be the epitome of realism and pragmatism and statecraft and being objective and being amoral, almost to the extent of being immoral, etc. So yeah, I would say that people should read the book. You may learn a thing or two from it. And it's a small book, tiny book. Abhijit Banerjee says, I got rejected by a girl whom I liked for a long time. She called me ugly. I feel sad. Yep, happens. Big deal. Move on. That's what I would say. I know your feelings are hurt, you feel sad, and so on and so forth. But listen, she's not the only girl in the world. Okay? And if you think that you're whatever, that you're below her standards, why don't you raise your standards and find a girl who's way better than her? So the point in life is that you don't allow any setback to hamper you for too long. Okay, she rejected you, she said something nasty to you. Okay, you can sit down for a day and feel bad. Next day you move on. She's not the only girl. There are better girls than her out there. You can reject somebody without saying nasty things to someone. A guy or a girl can reject someone without being nasty, without being mean, without being cruel. And if she was cruel and mean and nasty to you, maybe she's not a good person. Okay? So, and if she feels that she's above you, then that's not the kind of person you want to be with anyway, right? So the point is, don't let it affect you too much. Okay, what matters in life is not how pretty or how beautiful or how handsome or attractive you are. What truly matters in life is what you achieve in life. And you will find that most of the high achievers, the highest achievers, the 0.1% of society, 0.01% of society, they typically aren't good looking or great looking. But we have this idea that they're very attractive because of the success. Success is what makes you attractive. So go ahead and succeed in whatever you're doing. Then things will change. So the point is, my friend Arijit, this is no big deal. No big deal. Okay? You have to, you need to be mentally tough. You will find lots. The more rejections you get in life, the better you get at things. Okay? So it's no big deal. Move on from it. There are plenty of other girls, I'm sure better girls than her out there. Okay, all the best. Okay, what other questions? I'm sure there are lots of questions. Netizen says, please make another documentary style video like the Genghis Khan video. Yeah, look, there are very few. There's kind of a dearth of great topics out there. I mean, I'm sure there are hundreds of topics, but the Genghis Khan video that I made, which is one of the first videos I made on the channel, is about a mystery that nobody had solved for about 800 years. It's one of the it was one of the big unanswered questions of history. That was quite a topic, and it kind of was something that I was very interested in. And yeah, so that's why I made that video. And yeah, I'm sure I can make more such videos about interesting topics. The only reason I haven't done that is because it takes a lot of time to do that. Not just You have to structure the video. I'll tell you how the process works. Okay, you have to have a really interesting topic that lots of people would be interested in. Then you have to have the answer to the big question. Then you have to structure the video in a specific manner. Then you have to record the video. I'm giving you a very brief version of the process. Then you have to record the video, maybe a one take, two takes, whatever. Then you have to edit the video, find lots of images, find music. It's a long drawn out process. So that's why I've kind of not gone down that road again, but maybe I will going forward. So thank you for the suggestion. I really appreciate that. Football News says the US lost more than 12,000 aircrafts, helicopters, UAVs in Vietnam. Is the US military way weaker than it seems? Imagine this. They lost, I'm not sure what the number is. Okay, I'm not aware. I don't remember what the number is, how many aircraft, etc. they lost in Vietnam, the Americans. There were no UAVs those days, as far as I know. So you had aircraft of various kinds, uh, fixed wing aircraft like fighter planes and all, and rotor aircraft like helicopters. So assuming what you're saying is right, okay, I'm sure, assuming that they lost more than 12,000 aircraft, can you imagine what their industrial capability was at the time? That they could lose 12,000 plus aircraft and still remain a superpower. It's not way weaker than it seems. It's way more powerful than we can imagine, the US military. Those days, you do not have all the sophisticated software and technology and whatever we have today. So those days, aircraft also were not that sophisticated. And aircraft were much cheaper than what they are today. Today, the one F-35 will cost more than $100 million. One stealth bomber will cost more than $1 billion. These are incredibly high value aircraft. And they are so high value because they are so good. These are stealthy aircraft. You can't even see them on radar. Well, you can, but you can't, kind of. Okay, I don't go into the specifics, the details. In those days, aircraft turned up on radar. They were pretty cheap and all, so you could afford to lose lots of aircraft, and your industry would churn out way more. So the fact that they lost so many aircraft and still remained a superpower and actually increased their power, that tells you how incredibly powerful they are. So never underestimate the US military. They're not way weaker than they seem. They're way more powerful than you imagine. See it from that perspective. That is the truth. You have no idea how powerful the US military is. They can flatten nations on demand. Okay, don't ever underestimate the United States. All right. Let's see some more questions. Malik Sayed says, what do you think of the law of attraction and this sort of pseudoscience, such as the universe operates on frequencies and attracts the frequencies? Imagine the thing to happen and it happens. I don't know much about the law of attraction. There's a book by a lady called Rhonda something called The Secret. It's about the law of attraction. And obviously, there's no basis of whatever that is in science. Science is about observables and measurables, phenomena, quantities, objects, whatever. And obviously, there are some things that you can't really observe, like dark energy, but you kind of can measure it and so on. And then there are things like the law of attraction and spirits and souls and gods and all. These are beyond science. Okay, science does not deal with these things. So I would say it is incorrect to call this pseudoscience. It is not science at all. It's outside of the realm of science. When you say that something is pseudoscientific, it means that it claims to be scientific, but it's not. The law of attraction I'm sure it doesn't claim to be scientific. I don't think these people claim it's science. So I would not call it pseudoscientific. I would just call it beyond science. It is spirituality or whatever, but not science. And look, what's my opinion on this? I have no idea about this. Okay, that's what I will say. I have not seen the law of attraction at work. The law of attraction means if you genuinely desire something really, really, really hard, and you keep desiring it consciously every single day, then maybe that thing will come to you and you will achieve whatever you wanted. That's kind of what the law of attraction is. But does it mean that you should not take any action and just sit and think, desire, desire, desire? I don't think so. You have to desire something with all your heart and you have to work really hard towards it. And then in that case, it may happen. In which case, it's not really wrong. Because if you really desire something and you expend all your energy, all your time on that particular objective of yours, then the chances are pretty high, I would say, that you will achieve what you want. But if you claim that you will achieve something just by desiring it without taking action, well, that's a joke. Okay, that's kind of hoping to win the lottery. So that's kind of how I see it. It is definitely not science. I don't know about frequencies and whatnot. I look at the world from the perspective I'm familiar with, which is the perspective of science and physics. Um, and there are lots of different other perspectives out there that I'm not familiar with. So I don't go and talk about those. If I don't understand it, who am I to criticize that? So that's what I'll say about that. Okay. Okay. Excited. Excited says, if I like something, whether it's a skill or a subject, I have the urge of learning it. After I'm good at it, I lose the interest and yeah, I practice it so I can't forget it. But is it weird? Well, so if you like something, whether it's a skill, like let's say playing football, or a subject, like let's say mathematics, I have the urge of learning it. After I'm good at it, I lose interest. So if you're good at football, you lose interest in football. Or if become good at math, then you lose interest in math. And I practice it so I can't forget it. Is it weird? Well, everybody is different. Everyone's different. But I'm assuming you're a student. But the thing is, once you come out of your student life and you are in the world of adults and you have to have a livelihood, earn a livelihood, etc., then you're gonna have to acquire certain skills in whatever job you take up, and you cannot afford to lose interest in those things. Okay, and you're gonna be working every day, which means you're gonna be utilizing those skills every single day. In which case, you won't have the time to forget it. You may perhaps find over time that you lose interest, but well, then if you want to keep the job and advance in your career, then you can't quite lose interest. So yeah, there are people who are really good at stuff. People who acquire skills very rapidly. They kind of tend to lose interest in things once they have mastered it. So one has to be careful as to not be like this when you have a job and you have a career. So I don't think it's weird. It depends on your personality. It depends on your aptitude at various things and so on. All right. Mr. Osama Trump says, is a nuclear armed Iran a threat to India? You think Israel and the US will use India to tackle Iran if Iran becomes nuclear armed? Let's go to the map. So Iran is next door to India. We have a temporary nation in between, but then you have Iran. And Iran and India have historically have reasonably good relations, barring a few setbacks here and there. Now, we have a nuclear armed Pakistan, which is a terrorist nation. India is a nuclear power, a very responsible one. Then Israel is an undeclared nuclear power, and Iran may be on the verge of becoming a nuclear power. They have had this nuclear program for quite some time, and I suspect that they may already have sufficient fissile material to maybe build a few warheads, maybe 5 or a handful. So the question is, if Iran becomes a nuclear power, is that a threat to India? My perspective is that India need not be worried about a nuclear powered Iran. Of course, if Iran acquires 500 nuclear warheads or 1,000, then that kind of exerts pressure on the entire neighborhood, on the entire West Asia region and even the subcontinent. But as long as Iran has 5, 10, 20 nuclear warheads, Iran won't really be a threat to, definitely not India. So, how does a nation become a threat to someone? A nation becomes a threat to its neighbors if it becomes overwhelmingly more powerful than all its neighbors. Then it's a threat to everybody. It may have good intentions, but it has the capacity to steamroll you. Now, India, I don't know how many nuclear warheads we have. The West says we have roughly 130 nuclear warheads. It's known that India has sufficient fissile material for about 3,000 warheads, actually. But let's say India has 130 warheads, and Iran acquires, let's say, 10 or 20 warheads. Is Iran a threat to India? Not really. What if Iran acquires 300 nuclear warheads? Then, even though India and Iran don't have any unfriendly relations, you could perceive that as a threat. Okay? So that's how it goes. Even a friend of yours, even the most friendly nation, if they suddenly acquire or over time acquire 3 times the nuclear weapons that you have, the relationship changes. Let me give you a very rough, very crude example. Okay? Let's say you have a cat at home. Very nice cat, very cute cat, very friendly cat, right? Now let's say, and how big is a cat typically? About this big, yay big, yeah. Now let's say I magically transform that cat into the same animal, but 3 times the size. Okay, 3 times the size of a house cat by magic. So now your cat is the size of a leopard. Do you think your cat will behave in the same way with you now that it's a leopard sized cat? I assure you it won't. Its behavior will change. The size makes a difference. The size of its claws and its teeth makes a difference. So the same entity, if it is transformed into something else, will behave differently vis-a-vis you and everybody else. So a nuclear armed Iran is not really a threat for India if it has 5, 10, 20 warheads, 50. 50 would be kind of concerning. So you have to look at these factors. First of all, do we have a hostile relationship with this nation? We don't have a hostile relationship with Iran. No, we don't. Do we have any disputes with this nation? Border disputes or whatever? We don't. We don't have a border dispute or any such thing with Iran. Does Iran do something that infringes on India's national interests? Does India do anything that infringes on Iran's national interest? Not really. So overall, the relationship within the two nations is reasonably good. It can certainly be better, but it's reasonably good. So that's a good start. Now, if Iran becomes a nuclear power, as long as it's not too many nuclear weapons, 5, 10, 20, it's no big deal for India. It's actually a concern for Pakistan. Now, so that's the deal. Now, do you think Israel and US will use India to tackle Iran? That's up to us. Do we want to be used as a pawn on somebody's geopolitical chessboard, or do we want to have our own foreign policy, independent of others? If we want to have our own foreign policy that's independent of others, and we in such a way that we cannot be used by others, we have to be sufficiently powerful in our own right, which means that we need to become much more powerful than we are right now. Right now, see our neighborhood, the Americans can do whatever they want. They can do a regime change operation right next door to us. They can, well, you have a civil war in Burma right next to us. We are unable to control our own neighborhood. And there's so much interference in India's internal affairs right now from the Americans, quite visible. So India will have to become more powerful. But even as things stand, I don't think the US can use India to tackle other nations. For example, they would like to use India to be a counterweight against China and to do various things against China. I don't think we are willing to act as a pawn. And the same would go with Iran. Okay. Jeevan says this recent news that Pakistan is going to supply massive amounts of arms and ammunition to Bangladesh. Do such activities threaten India's chicken neck area in the future? May the chicken neck area increase in size? Okay, where's the chicken neck area? It's a Siliguri corridor. I'm sure we are all familiar with it. This area is the chicken neck area, Siliguri, Bagdogra, etc. That area. And it's about 25-30 kilometers wide. How wide is it? Let's see. Roughly 24, 23, 22 kilometers wide. So it's a point of concern. It's an area of concern. Uh, and the theory is that if somebody wants to cut off the far east of India from the rest of India, they have to take over the chicken neck area, the Siliguri corridor. Now, yes, I've heard this news that Pakistan is going to supply a large quantity of arms, ammunition, etc. to Bangladesh. I am not surprised in the least. Why is that? Pakistan, since 2022 February, or when was the Imran Khan coup in which he was ousted? Whenever it was, sometime in the first half of 2022. Since that time, Pakistan has firmly become a US vassal, a US client state, a US puppet state. So Pakistan is a US vassal. And now Bangladesh, since the events of the coup, regime change operation that happened recently, Bangladesh is also a US vassal. So one vassal to another, they will do whatever is in the best interest of each other. And obviously, these decisions are not taken by the government of Pakistan or the Pakistani army. These are instructions given to them from higher up, from their masters, which is, well, the United States. Who else, right? So there is going to be increasing synergy between West Pakistan and East Pakistan. Okay, they would like to recreate a scenario where India is surrounded. India is flanked on two sides by East Pakistan and West Pakistan. So there's going to be a growing amount of synergy between the two nations. There's going to be a growing amount of coordination and synchronization between the two nations. That is definitely a point of concern for India. And such activities may indeed threaten the Indian chicken neck area, the Siliguri corridor area, very much. India is going to have to be extra careful, super careful. So there we are. In the future, will the chicken neck increase in size? Well, it depends on various factors, but it may increase in size. I would say that we need to create a buffer state within Bangladesh. Okay. So if you look at Bangladesh, there are these areas to the west of Bangladesh, Rangpur, Rajshahi, etc. We need to probably encourage the Bangladeshi Hindus to create a buffer state, a separate nation in this region, a nation only for Hindus. In which case, we will have a reasonable amount of buffer, and you can say that the chicken neck has de facto increased in size. So, yeah, that's what I would say. It's all speculation right now, but India cannot afford to always remain on the back foot. If the border with Bangladesh, with East Pakistan, is a porous border, as we know very well, then please understand, a porous border works both ways. You've had this influx of Bangladeshis and illegal Bangladeshi infiltrators into India for decades. Well, it can work the other way too if it's a porous border. So let's kind of use that to our advantage. That's what I would say. Anmol Kumar says, should India host the Olympics in 2036? I'm asking this question because most of the political analysts and YouTubers are saying it will be a disaster to host the Olympics in India. You know, there are certain very powerful nations that have, in recent times, had this policy of promoting certain influencers, YouTubers, political analysts within India. Certain very powerful nations have this policy, and they're quite open and blatant about this policy. They promote certain YouTubers, they promote certain so-called influencers, and they play this this game of subnational diplomacy, and they promote and promote in various ways, allegedly, certain alleged political parties in India, allegedly. Okay, it is said. That's what one hears on the grapevine. So, with that said, why are we surprised if some YouTubers and influencers and analysts, etc., are claiming the Olympics, if we host the Olympics in 2036, it will be a disaster for India? Why are we surprised about it? My other question is, why can't we have our own opinion? If so and so influencer or analyst or YouTuber has said that, do we have to take them seriously? We should have the ability to critically analyze things ourselves. Most people I see, they listen to the opinions of certain analysts and influencers and YouTubers they like. And that's what they believe, whatever these people say. Why? Can't you analyze things yourself? Can't you look at information yourself? You need to develop the ability, the skills to do that. That's what I keep urging everybody. So I disagree that hosting the Olympics in 2036 will be a disaster for India. Why will it be a disaster? Some YouTubers, I am aware, are spreading this narrative that hosting the Olympics will be a disaster for India. And I'll assure you about something. You know, YouTubers, influencers, analysts are categorized, right? Right wing versus left wing. In case you're not aware, some of the so-called X-wing or Y-wingers are actually on the other side, but you're not aware of it. They're playing a double game. That also you should be aware of. Whether it's this side or that side, this wing or that wing. There's always the possibility that somebody who's on this wing or that wing may actually be batting for the other side. Please understand this. Okay, I'm not naming anybody. I'm not calling out anyone. I'm just saying in general, be aware of these things. I'm of the opinion that we should host the Olympics. Of course, we should do it in the right way, in a sustainable way. So if you create all this infrastructure, let's say you create like 5, 10 sports facilities, stadiums, whatever, you should ensure that after the Olympics are over, you're going to keep on using them, and these are going to promote sports in India for a long time. So recently we had the football World Cup in whichever Gulf nation. Which one? Qatar, was it? No, I believe most of that sporting infrastructure, stadiums, etc., is lying unused. So that sort of scenario is bad. You invest hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars in creating all this infrastructure, and you only use it once for the World Cup or the Olympics, and then you never use it again. That should not happen. So it should be something that is properly planned and executed. So as long as we do that, I think we should be fine. It would be great for India. So I am of the opinion that we should certainly host the Olympics in 2036. Of course, we have to win the bid, but let's see. Okay. Mr. Osama Trump says Russia has given a statement that the war will now not be limited to up to Ukraine, but will go on the internet, Europe as well, especially France. Do you think Russia and Iran will jointly initiate World War III? I don't want World War III. I don't think that any World War III is going to happen anytime soon. I hope it never happens. Look, statements, I can give 1,000 statements. Anybody can say whatever they want. Please understand the incredibly large difference between words and actions. Politicians, most politicians, I think all politicians, uh, we know they make lots of statements. Now, do they? And they make lots of promises, especially during campaigning for elections. Do they keep all their promises? Obviously not. I cannot think of a single politician who keeps all of his or her election promises. I can't think of a single person. Can't think of a single one. So, considering that, with that in mind, please be aware that geopolitics also is that kind of game. There's a lot of mental games that go on. A lot of mental disintegration strategies are employed by putting out statements, by making strong statements, and sometimes obfuscating things. Sometimes misdirection is involved, and so much more. So, look, I don't care what statements are given. Generally, in war, like the great, what's his name, Sun Tzu, right? The Chinese guy. One of the most famous statements attributed to Sun Tzu is that all warfare is about deception. So if you're planning to do something, do you think it makes sense to telegraph that in advance, that, hey, I'm going to do these things now in the war that we are fighting against each other? I'm going to do this in the next coming 2-3 weeks or 2-3 months. Do you think it makes sense to do that? To tell your opponent in advance what your strategy is going to be like? No, makes no sense. So statements, I don't care about statements. I only look at what are the actions that are being taken. And it makes sense that the war is not limited to one domain. War is a multi-domain thing, multi-dimensional thing. There is propaganda war, there is cyber war. We don't know what cyber attacks are happening right now. Okay, even the recipient of a cyber attack will keep quiet about that often, so as to not let the opponent know that they've succeeded. Um, so warfare exists at so many different levels. There is lawfare, there is propaganda warfare, there is social media warfare, uh, there is diplomatic warfare. And India is the recipient of some of this warfare right now from our so-called friends. So, so that's the situation. The war obviously is not confined to just the physical domain of Ukraine, and that's something that's already been going on for quite some time. It is beyond Ukraine. The sanctions are war. Sanctions, you know what sanctions are? Economic sanctions. It's siege warfare. It is the modern equivalent of siege warfare. You besiege a nation or a city. In the old days, you would have siege warfare, which means you have a city that has walls, defensive walls, fortifications, and the enemy will come and take over the entire land around the city. They can't break into the city because of the walls, but they will starve the city of all materials, all resources. So no more food can reach the city. If the city has a source of water, great. Otherwise, you can't even get water, and then you will starve them out and wait for them to surrender. That's siege warfare. Today, you have economic sanctions that do exactly the same thing. You starve a nation of its requirements, of the resources that it needs, and you wait for them to crumble. So that is warfare. The Americans are doing that against Russia. That goes beyond Ukraine. All so many other nations are involved in that. So there are so many domains to war. Okay, so we should not be surprised about that. But the Russians will never tell anyone in advance what they're going to do. Statements, well, statements have their own place in the thing, but understand it, it's much more than that. Mokshagna Venkat Kottamasu says, you said that the US is trying all its ways to hinder the growth of India. I'm not saying it's trying all its ways. I'm not saying it is trying everything in its power to hinder the growth of India. If the Americans try everything in their power to hinder the growth of India, they will impose economic sanctions on India, the same kind of sanctions they've imposed on Russia. Have they done that? They have not. So how can you say that they are trying always? No. What does the US want from India? The US wants India to remain at around $4 trillion or $5 trillion as economy. They want India to remain a $4 or $5 trillion economy, not rise beyond that. And if India's economy grows, the economic growth should be slow. India should remain a middle power. India should keep on aspiring forever to be a great power, but never become a great power, economically or otherwise. So they will take specific calibrated actions to achieve this objective. But they won't impose sanctions on India unless we do certain things. So I have never ever said that the US is trying always, every single way possible, to hinder the growth of India. Please understand there are nuances in geopolitics. It's not black and white. There are lots of shades of gray. So I don't know what the SOSA agreement is. They've signed all kinds of agreements with India. There's a lot of cooperation happening between the US and India. So they will cooperate with India as well as hinder India. They will cooperate with India wherever it suits them and it benefits them. They will hinder the growth of India in a lot of other ways. So they don't want India to become the next China. So there is a situation. Please understand geopolitics is nuanced, and please don't attribute things to me that I have not said. I have never said that the US is trying every way or always to hinder India's growth. Okay. Aridatta says presidential republic versus parliamentary republic. Presidential, way better, especially for India. The larger a nation is, see, the principle behind this is very simple. The larger a nation is, the more centralized its rule has to be. If you decentralize the rule in a very large nation, you're going to end up with multiple nations. It's going to fragment. When it comes to a very small nation, let's say like Singapore, you can decentralize everything because it's anyway centralized. Okay? So the smaller a nation, the more you can afford to decentralize. And the larger a nation, the more centralized the power has to be. Look at the US. It has a presidential system. Makes sense for them to have a presidential system. They have a two-party system, which is just one step above a one-party state like China or North Korea. So they talk about democracy, but they are implementing what's best for them, which is not very democratic. Now, we in India have copied the governance system of a small island in the Atlantic Ocean, of a nation that is part of a small, that is on a small island, and not fully but partially on the small island. So it is that's England or the UK, okay, and we have copied their parliament, their governance system, which is Westminster democracy. That system evolved over roughly several centuries in this very small part of the world, and it is well suited for that part of the world. It had a monarchy. It still has a monarchy. Do we have a monarchy? No. So we have copied a system that is eminently unsuitable for a subcontinent-sized nation like ours. We should have adopted a system that is best suited for ours. And historically, we have had very different systems before we got colonized, invaded, conquered, and colonized. So I am very clear that the presidential system is far better for India than the parliamentary system. Far better. And because we copied this system of the UK, we had to make certain silly changes to it. See, in the UK, you have a House of Lords, right? And the House of the Commons. House of Commons, House of Lords. So we have done away with our princely states, and we don't have any lords, so we had to create this Rajya Sabha because we have to blindly, slavishly copy the British, right? So we had to create this Rajya Sabha with this artificial structure. And today you have a situation where the Rajya Sabha kind of has a veto over the Lok Sabha. In the UK, you don't have that. In the UK, the House of Lords cannot veto anything that the House of Commons does. They can make recommendations and so on, but they cannot veto any bill that is passed, any law that is passed, or any decision that is taken in the House of Commons. In India, the Rajya Sabha can veto things, which is horrible for democracy, because it is the Lok Sabha that is the directly elected representatives of the people. The Rajya Sabha is indirect representation, and lots of that is not really democratic at all. So that is one problem. Secondly, the head of state in the UK is the king or the queen. So because we don't have that in India, we had to create this ceremonial position of the president of India. There should be no ceremonial positions. There should only be actual positions of power. So we have done all these weird things. I don't think it's suitable for our nation. I think we should have a more direct kind of democracy, presidential democracy, where people are allowed to choose and vote for the president, the person who will lead the nation for the next X amount of years, 4, 5, whatever. You can't even vote for your prime minister today. You can only vote for your local MP, and then the MPs get together and decide who will be the prime minister, and that's problematic. So we need a better system for sure. Manan Panchal says, I'm 28 years old. I was lost in terms of career due to some bad decisions I took and due to mental health issues. Is it too late now? Too late to revive my career now? 28, you're young, bro. Absolutely not too late. It's never too late to start something new. So listen, so whatever happened in the past happened. You don't forget it, okay? You cannot forget what happened in the past. It should serve as a reference point for you, or a set of reference points for you, that these things went wrong for so and so reasons, and that's for you to decide why it went wrong. That's for you to understand, and that is obviously something that adds to your experience and to your understanding of the world and of yourself. And if you're 28, it's absolutely not too late to revive your career. Look, life is long. Today, with the kind of advances in science, technology, healthcare we have, you can be a fully functional human being with as long as you make good choices and live a good lifestyle. You can be a fully functional human being all the way into your 80s. So I think you're just starting off in life right now. What they say is that life really begins at the age of 40, because until then you're learning stuff, which is kind of true. And so I would absolutely disagree that it's too late to revive your career, or to make a different career choice now. There's a lot that you can do, as long as you do it well, you're smart about it, and you work hard. Absolutely, all the options, I would say, are open for you. The longer you wait in life to make changes, the fewer options you have. So if you're 28 and you want to make a change in your career or revive a career, you will have a certain number of options. If you wait till 38, the options will reduce. If you wait till 48, you will have even fewer options, unless you can totally reinvent yourself. So I think 28 is not too old. It's absolutely not too late. As long as you are positive, and you work really hard, and you understand your strengths and weaknesses, and play accordingly. So I would say, go for it. Absolutely go for it, and all the best, sir. All the best. Udit Mahesh says, could another insurgency occur in the Northeast under the current government? Could the Mizos and Cookies join hands, since they share the same ethnicity? Well, after after the recent developments in Bangladesh, and given the situation in Burma, the civil war that's going on right now, it's India will have to be really, really, really careful about the Northeast, the Far East of India. One, I can assure you that we will have to be really watchful when it comes to Bangladesh. It is very possible, almost a guarantee, that you will see the same kind of problematic behavior from East Pakistan or Bangladesh that we used to see in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s from Pakistan, West Pakistan. We're going to have to be really careful. They will nurture and promote all kinds of anti-India elements, which means separatist elements and so on, from Bangladeshi territory. It is very likely to happen, which means that you could have such problems in the Northeast, right? So yeah, I agree with you. It could happen, and India is going to have its hands full. We really, really need to focus on the Northeast. We need to fortify our defenses and our capabilities there, military capabilities, uh, civilian defense capabilities, all of that. We need to do that. Yeah, so it will need to happen. I'm sure the government of India is doing whatever is required. About the mesos and cookies, I think the less we speak about the mesos and cookies, the better. But I get your point, and you are not far from the truth. Right. Okay, Vishak Nair says, if a country could surpass the superpower, United States, how would the country do it and resist their bullying? Well, that's the whole thing, right? It's very difficult to surpass a superpower that is at the peak of its strength. Right now, the US is at the peak of its military strength. People talk about the US as being a nation in decline and so on and so forth. There is decline happening in the US. It is societal decline. The fabric of society in the US, there's strife in society. There are increasing racial tensions. Society is being destabilized by the massive influx of illegal immigrants happening from the southern border in the US, that the current government, the current regime is engineering. There is that happening. There is a complete collapse of the family system. Everybody is a single mother or single father. Every child comes from a family that's broken, divorced family. The economy isn't doing great. There is tremendous inflation. Everything is becoming more expensive. That sort of decline is very visible in the US. Societal decline. But as a military power, the US has never been stronger than what it is today. Please understand that. Hmm? With that understood, how could a nation how could a nation uh, surpass the US? First of all, it won't happen overnight. It'll take 50 years. Let's talk about let's be open. We're talking about India, aren't we? Obviously, we're talking about India here. Look, India cannot even dream of surpassing the US for another 50 years. Unless something precipitous happens in the US and they completely collapse, which would send the whole world into chaos. And then all bets are off. But if the US remains a superpower the way it is for the next 50 years, they will do their best to prevent any nation like India from rising to a great power status or a superpower status. And superpower means you have complete control or significant control over the entire world's economy, supply chains, trade routes, all of that, which means you have a gigantic array of extraterritorial global military bases, all that the US has. So, so how could India do such a thing? By slowly growing and being very quiet about it. Indians have this tendency to shout and scream from the rooftops, we are a superpower, we are this. No, shh, keep quiet. Like Deng Xiaoping said, hide your strength and bide your time. Keep a low profile. That's what India needs to do. So we need to stop discussing the superpower thing. We are not a superpower. We are not going to be a superpower for the next 50 years unless something very drastic happens. What we can aspire, see, we have to take it day by day, step by step. We are right now a $4 trillion economy. I think we have now become a $4 trillion economy. The US is what, 20 plus, right? China is 17, $18 trillion. And then comes India. And then there's Germany and Japan, which will soon uh, become history because India will surpass them soon. That's a guarantee. So India has to do it slowly, steadily, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. Take it a day at a time. And stop acting bigger than what you are. Keep a low profile. Work hard. That's all India needs to do. And resist their bullying. Well, how do you resist a superpower's bullying? By having other powerful friends and by having lots of alliances, multi-alignment, multi-allying, and all that. So, if in the best way, the ideal way for India to resist American bullying would be to have great relations with not just Russia but also China. Well, China, that's far fetched, considering the past history of China vis-a-vis India. So I don't have the solutions, but if India can do that, have great relations with Russia as well as with China, if we can engineer that, then we will be much more difficult to bully. So lots of ifs and buts here. But yeah, the as a matter of principle, you have to do it quietly. You have to hide your strength and bide your time. Be very patient, work as hard as possible, and have as many powerful friends as possible. And don't step on the superpower's toes. As far as possible, keep them happy. That's how you do it. And you do it for the next 50 years, then you will become, hopefully, a superpower. That is how you do it, sir. Okay, loves yapping says, in your opinion, what has held back India's potential the most? Historical atrocities like famines or the past government's ability to address corruption and other ongoing issues? Look, what has held back India's potential the most, right? Look, these historical atrocities like the genocide perpetrated by the Turks, the genocide perpetrated by the British, the famines and all of that, that is in the past. That is in the past tense. It happened and it's over now. There is no genocide happening today. There is no famine being engineered by foreign powers today, right? And if we look at 1947 onwards, then no such thing was happening. So then what has held back India's potential the most? First of all, Nehruvian socialism. India in 1947 was far ahead than most Asian economies. China was in a shambles, civil war in China. Japan was on its knees, or even further down. They had been nuked, two nuclear tests on Japanese people, on Japanese civilians, and the whole country is destroyed. That's what Japan was. Korea at the time was an extremely poor country, and the Korean War was going to happen, 50s. So if you look at the whole of Asia, India was in a great position. We had our entire infrastructure intact. We had a very powerful military. We had the most powerful military in Asia, the British Indian Army, which became the Indian Army and Navy and Air Force. We had the most powerful military in Asia. And yet, we continued to wallow in mediocrity. Japan took off. China, after the 90s, took off because they made a choice in the 70s and 80s. If we had opened up our economy and done so judiciously in 1947, and if we had adopted the right policies, then we would have taken off in the 40s, 50s itself. And then it would have been impossible for China to surpass India or catch up with India. So, what held back India's potential was the policies of the post 1947 governments of India, the economic policies mainly, and of course, the system that was created by the British and continued by the Indian governments post 1947. The entire system, the governance system, various governance organs, various institutions were all created by the British. And they were created by the British to, to help them rule over India and extract everything of value out of India and keep the common man, woman, and child of India under the heavy boot of the governance machinery. That's what the British created these institutions for. And the institutions were never really reformed. And they still continue in the same way, essentially, to rule over India and to rule over Indians. So the masters have changed, but the system has remained the same. And it operates in the same way as it used to operate before 47. And there's allegedly a tremendous amount of corruption at various levels in the governance machinery, allegedly. I'm sure everybody has experiences allegedly. So that's what has held back India. Imagine there's no corruption in India today, or 90% of the corruption is dealt with. India will take off. India will take off. Imagine how much inertia there is in India because of these issues. Imagine how much of the money of the common man, woman, and child of India is being wasted on in giving bribes. How much time is being wasted fighting the system. So these are the things that are holding back India right now. The education system is another great example of this horror. It's a continuation of the 19th century colonial British education system. And what does it do? It produces graduates who have no skills. And then, if those graduates get jobs, whoever has given them the job needs to train them from scratch, and so on. So there are all these issues, systemic issues, and allegedly tremendous amounts of corruption in various parts of the governance machinery, allegedly. These are the things that are holding back India's potential even today and have done so since 1947. Okay. Xmas, Ymas, Zmas says one dimension is space, x axis. 2D is space, y axis plus x axis. 3D is XYZ axis, 3 axis, right? Okay. 4D is all that plus the time. So why is 4D time parameter instead of space? Time parameter can exist in 1D also. Please explain. You can take x as the time dimension, time coordinate if you wish, and don't consider the other 3 spatial coordinates if you wish. It's entirely up to you. So there are 4 dimensions that we are aware of: length, breadth, height, and time. So you don't have to start with the x x-axis as one spatial dimension. You can start with the x-axis and consider it to be the dimension of time. It's entirely arbitrary. Instead of calling it the x-axis, you can call it the p-axis if you wish, or the t-axis, or the q-axis, or the m-axis. It's entirely up to you. These are all arbitrary notations, but there are four dimensions that we are aware of, and one dimension we are aware of very only vaguely, which is the time dimension. But that's how we were able to. That's how Albert Einstein was able to construct theory of general relativity, which is one of the most successful theories in science that we have. So yes, you are right. Time as a parameter consider can be considered independently of the other dimensions, if you wish. If it helps you in your calculations, or if you desire to do so, there is no one stopping you from doing it. There's no one stopping any physicist from constructing an axis with time as a dimension and ignoring the other three spatial dimensions if you so desire. But what do you get out of it is the question, right? So each of these dimensions, you can consider them independently of the other if you so wish. But to solve problems in physics and to get actual real world results, you have to consider dimensions not independent of each other but together. So generally in Newtonian physics, you have three dimensions. You can start with one dimension only, but then you have to introduce time, which is the t parameter in your Newtonian equations of motion and all that. So that's why you have to start considering the dimensions together, because otherwise you don't get any real world results. Why am I always clean shaven? I don't know. Maybe because if I don't shave, then I will look like, I don't know, Taliban maybe. Long hair and beard. Good God, I'm 6'1", so once again, I think it'll scare people if I have a beard. So I like the clean shaven look anyway. I think it was once during university that I didn't shave for a month. Then I had a beard only once. After that, I ensured that I was always reasonably clean shaven. Book recommendations for linear algebra and real analysis. Linear algebra. How come I have a book right here? Kuldeep Singh is a great book if you want to start off with. Okay, really, really well written book. Kuldeep Singh on linear algebra. And if you want a book on real analysis, what a coincidence. Kuldeep Singh once again. This is not really real analysis. This is number theory, but it's a great book. For number theory, real analysis. Where do you go? You go with Rudin, baby Rudin, big Rudin. Can't think of a recommendation off the top of my head. I think you could go with what's his name? What was the child prodigy mathematician who is no longer a child? Fields Medal winner, Terence Tao. I think Terence Tao has written a couple of really good books on analysis, real analysis or oral analysis. So there's plenty of options available, but definitely for linear algebra, you should go with Kuldeep Singh, and obviously Gilbert Strang has really good books on linear algebra, at least a couple of books. And if you want to solve problems and get good at the subject by solving lots of problems, go for the Shom series books. A whole bunch of those over here, back from my college and university days. Grimsobad says, is mathematics the programming language of the universe? Yes, if there was a programmer who coded the universe, then the language he or she or it used was clearly mathematics. Because mathematics is what underlies the patterns and the regularities that we observe in the universe. It's all mathematical, which means that the programmer who coded the universe used mathematics as the language, or maybe whatever language they used We perceive those patterns and regularities as the laws of mathematics, isn't it? Uh, Vikram Geopolitical says, if you have to live under the rule of either Lenin or Mao Zedong, whom would you choose? I would rather choose to escape via wormhole to a different universe because, good God, disaster from both sides. No way. Oh, imagine having that choice. It's no choice really. Terrible. Okay. Winter Ragnar's Wolf says if India hadn't been colonized. See, this is a completely hypothetical question, all speculation. You can answer anything, it may be true. If India hadn't been colonized, what level of cultural, technological, and economic advancement do you think the country would have achieved today? Maybe we would have advanced tremendously in all spheres, culturally, technologically, economically, or maybe we would have done modest progress. There is no way of knowing because it's entirely hypothetical and speculative, isn't it? Um, but yes, India would have been definitely better off than what it is today. That I can assure you. We would have an indigenous education system and an indigenous form of governance. We would never have been deindustrialized. The British deindustrialized India. So all those things wouldn't have happened. We would have better genetics because our the people, most of the people who represented our best genetics, they were the warriors and the leaders who were all killed off. So India would have been a much better uh, civilization than what it is today. We would have higher standards for sure. Right now, we are wallowing in mediocrity. We would have much higher standards than what we have today. We would have much better leaders than what we have today. So overall, India would have been much better. But culturally also, India would have been so much more better today. We wouldn't be speaking a foreign language. We wouldn't. Uh, our entertainment system would be much better. Our regional, local languages, indigenous languages would not be dying like they are today. Economically, we would have been much better. So overall, I would say we would have been much better than where we are today. But to what extent, to what degree, that's hard to tell because n number of things can happen. Shri Ramachandraya Namaha says, how does the Earth's magnetic field protect itself from solar flares? The magnetic field doesn't protect itself from solar flares, it protects the Earth from the solar wind. What is the solar wind? Oh, where you have it? There you have it. Wow, I did not know you could do that. Can I see Mars? You can even see Mars. Venus? You can even see Venus from here. Anyway, let's come back to that. I apologize. I like toys. Give me a toy, I'll play with it. Okay, so here's the deal. The Earth has a magnetic field. Okay. What is the origin of the magnetic field? The origin of the magnetic field is the interior of the Earth, this liquid metal below the magma layer, which is in motion, and you have charged particles in it, and charged particles in motion give rise to uh, a magnetic field, which well, it originates in special relativity. So we have a magnetic field, a reasonably powerful magnetic field. The lines of force, they kind of originate at the poles, roughly around the poles, North Pole, South Pole. Now, you have something called the solar wind. The solar wind is this stream of charged particles, protons, electrons, etc., that flow out of the sun. Tremendous amount of solar wind is flowing out of the sun at any given point in time. It's plasma. So, and then you also have cosmic rays and much more. Okay, that comes from all over the galaxy. So, but we're talking about solar wind here, not solar flares, solar wind. And solar flares also give off large quantities of solar wind, charged particles that can mess up the electronics on the planet and inundate the surface of the planet with all kinds of terrifying particles, which can give you cancer, destroy your DNA, mutate your DNA, cause damage of all kinds and all that. So, what happens is that When you have a magnetic field, charged particles, they move in curved lines in magnetic fields. Okay. Now, the what that does is that we have these magnetic lines of force coming out of the polar region of the Earth, and these magnetic lines of force, they trap the charged particles coming from the sun and concentrate them in some parts of the Earth, where they enter the atmosphere and glow, and that's what causes the auroras. And most of these charged particles, they're trapped in the magnetic field, and they never really reach the atmosphere and the surface of the Earth. So essentially, that's kind of what happens. And the magnetic field of the Earth is what essentially ensures that we have this kind of life on the planet. And that's why we still have oceans on the planet. If you look at Mars, it's very clear, looking at the surface of the planet Mars, that there were once oceans on Mars, oceans of water. There were rivers on Mars. You can see rivers and canyons and all the shapes left behind by that. But where's the water? All the surface water has disappeared, except for wherever you have some ice. So why did all the water disappear? It's because Mars lost its magnetic field. So the solar wind stripped away the atmosphere until we have a very thin atmosphere left on Mars. And the solar wind, all those charged particles, they destroyed the water also. They ionized the water in the process of very slow electrolysis. So water was ionized, dissociated into hydrogen and oxygen, and all the water disappeared from the planet, surface of the planet. So that's what would happen if we did not have a magnetic field on the planet. The magnetic field traps the solar wind and prevents it from destroying the atmosphere and water. Okay. Ishan Gupta says, how do you think the present day India would have been if Turks had never invaded? Clearly, much better. Much better. Amit Tripathi says, what's your view on the recent F-16 crash? Amit, I'm sure, is referring to the incident in Ukraine. So the Americans have dispatched a number of F-16 fighter planes. It's a 50-year-old fighter plane, which is still reasonably quite good. And they have dispatched a number of these fighter planes to Ukraine. And the Ukrainians will use them against Russia. And what one hears apparently is that apparently the F-16 that crashed was shot down by Ukraine itself in a case of friendly fire. Sometimes you have these incidents, unfortunate incidents, in which your defense mechanism, uh, it shoots down your own aircraft. It's known to happen at times. Okay, so it looks like that's what happened. The Ukrainian air defenses shot down their own aircraft. Essentially, that's what I hear. Not 100% confirmed or sure, but that's what I've heard. So that's what I can tell you. Deb says, the future of Bangladesh, according to you, and its impacts on India. Well, first of all, let me start by saying that I wish the people of Bangladesh nothing but happiness and prosperity. Okay. Uh, may they get everything they desire in life, and may no misfortune befall them. Let me preface by saying that. Now, the truth is, Bangladesh was artificially carved out of India in 1947 as East Pakistan. And then in 71, it transformed itself into a different nation, Bangladesh. And the influence of the Pakistani army was removed by the Indian armed forces. India liberated Bangladesh from Pakistan. Uh, so that's what happened. But the truth is, Bangladesh is still an artificial nation. It's been artificially created, carved out of India. So I think eventually, long term, 100-year horizon, probably this entire region will revert to becoming Indian again. Maybe 100 years, maybe 200 years from now, you will need some cultural changes, civilizational changes to happen before we can reincorporate Bangladesh into India. Until then, it will exist in some shape or form. As long as the US is all powerful in the world. They will be a US vassal state like they are right now. And the people of Bangladesh are already beginning to realize that this coup has not really empowered the students. This coup that happened recently, in which Sheikh Hasina was ousted, it has been portrayed as a student revolution, as a student coup, uh, as, 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 as a restoration of democracy and whatnot. So, if it was really a student revolution or whatever they call it, why is not a single student leader a member of the cabinet in the government, in this new government? Why? It's becoming apparent and clear that the students were used as a pretext to achieve a geopolitical aim, objective, outcome in Bangladesh. And now we hear that there's a new round of student protests that's happening against this new regime that has been put in place undemocratically. So I think there's going to be a period of turmoil in Bangladesh, maybe a long period of turmoil, when the people slowly start realizing that they have been played, that this new regime is nothing but a puppet of a foreign country, just like what you have in Pakistan. So I think there's going to be a period of turmoil. I see that their economy slowing down. Uh, I don't have a tremendous amount of hope for the Bangladesh economy. It was doing well as long as Sheikh Hasina was in power. Now it's going to flounder in the coming years, unfortunately. So, if the people of Bangladesh are not careful, if the new regime is not careful, Bangladesh could very well go down the same road that Pakistan has gone down. That's what could happen. That's what will most likely happen. Look, in Pakistan, the people of Pakistan have no say in the governance of their nation and the future of their nation. There's nothing the people of Pakistan can do about it, because the nation is controlled by the military. In Bangladesh, also, the nation will most likely be controlled by the military. The military is the backbone of the nation in Pakistan. It owns the nation in Pakistan. Sooner or later, the same thing will happen in Bangladesh. You will have a puppet prime minister who will have no real power, and the real power will be in the armed forces. And they will, over time, run the show in Bangladesh any way they want, as long as they fulfill the objectives of the superpower. That is what I see happening in the short to medium term, at least medium term, in Bangladesh. And for the situation to improve, India will have to rise, which will take 20, 30 years. So, for the next 20, 30 years, things are not going to look good for Bangladesh. Bangladesh is going to go backwards. It's going to become East Pakistan again. That's how I see things going in Bangladesh. I hope I'm wrong. I have nothing against the people of Bangladesh. I wish them well, but their fate is no longer in their hands. They believe they've achieved some great success. Wait and watch. Come back and watch this video in 5 years, and you will see that I was right. Okay. Ambati says, will Trump be able to revive the US economy and stop the war in Ukraine right after he becomes elected as the president of the US, in case that happens? Look, there must be some things he can do which can reasonably rapidly change the economic situation in the US. I'm sure some things will take much longer. When it comes to the war, the Ukraine war, he can stop it in one day if he wants, by giving Putin whatever Putin wants. What does Putin want? What are Putin's objectives in Ukraine? First, regime change in Kiev, Zelensky gone, a pro Russia government comes to power in Kiev. That's number one. Number two, all uh, denazification of Ukraine, means all these Nazi elements should be, let's say, neutralized in Ukraine. And third, no more NATO influence in Ukraine. And fourth, Ukraine becomes permanently a neutral country and not an anti-Russia country. How does this process start? I would say ideally with a regime change in Kiev and a pro-Russia government coming to power. So if Trump is willing to give this to Putin, then the war will end immediately. So will Trump be willing to give that? And mm, even more pertinent, even if Trump is willing to give that to Putin, will the US establishment allow Trump to do that? That's the question. So some things Trump could do. I think the economy is a easier task to some extent. Some policies could alleviate the burden on the people, the inflationary burden, etc., on the people. But some things will take longer to change. So some things are easier, some things are really hard, some are impossible. I don't think Trump can end the war, even if he wants to. The U.S. establishment won't allow him to end the war because they want the war. They have pushed Russia into the war. Putin started the war, which means that you can blame him, but he was forced into it. He had to do it to safeguard his national interest. Arush Verma says, what do you think about India's participation in the head of state summit in Pakistan? There's the SCO summit that's coming up. The Pakistanis have invited India. They've they've sent out an invitation to India, and obviously India will not participate. We refuse to engage with Pakistan in any manner whatsoever, with good reason. Pakistan is a terrorist nation. We want to have nothing to do with them. So whenever the SCO heads of state summit happens, Mr. Modi won't go to Pakistan. No question about it. At best, we may send a representative, a low-level junior representative, perhaps. I'm not sure even that would happen vis-a-vis Pakistan. So that's what I think, and I think it's the right decision. Akash Pingle says, after coming back from Ukraine to India, Prime Minister Modi called Biden and Putin. What's going on here? Look, the visit to Ukraine by Prime Minister Modi was merely a courtesy visit. There is no way to advance India's national interest by engaging with Ukraine, by engaging with Zelensky and his regime. Zelensky is a puppet of a foreign power. Zelensky is in power undemocratically and unconstitutionally in Ukraine. See, according to the Ukrainian constitution, there should have been a general election in Ukraine by April or perhaps May, March, April, May, somewhere around that time. And there was no general election, and Zelensky is still in power, which means he's in power illegally, undemocratically, unconstitutionally. And he's in power only because the US has allowed him to be in power. So he's a puppet of a foreign power. And he has no real say over the future of his nation. His nation is being used as cannon fodder. The people are being used as cannon fodder. And Ukraine is devastated. The economy is devastated. There's nothing India stands to gain by engaging with Ukraine. So why did Mr. Modi go there? Just to balance things out. Look, we cannot afford to make the superpower unhappy too much. We have obviously refused to participate in the sanctions against Russia. We have a completely independent foreign policy. We are buying tremendous amounts of oil from Russia. So let's kind of balance things out by going to Ukraine in a symbolic visit, courtesy visit, putting your hand on Zelensky's shoulder, giving him a couple of hugs and all. What do we lose from that? What do we stand to lose? Nothing. So that's why Mr. Modi went to Ukraine. So he comes back and then he speaks with Mr. Biden. I don't know if it was Mr. Biden or an AI clone of Biden, but officially it is said that Mr. Modi spoke with Mr. Biden. Biden has not been seen for quite some time. I don't even know if he is still alive. I'm not sure if he was alive 1 year ago. Apparently, there are lots of body doubles of Biden. Every day his appearance changes, his height changes. So I think there are body doubles in play when it comes to Biden, but it doesn't matter. When you say that you spoke with Biden, it means that you spoke with the US government. So Mr. Modi apparently had a call with somebody in the US government. It is said that it was Biden. And then a day or two later, he speaks with Mr. Putin. So what's going on here? So India is playing a balancing game. India's interests are, we have to safeguard our interests. And it is very clear that the US doesn't want India to keep growing. The US wants to constrain India's growth and constrain India as a power. And it is very important for India not to become too dependent on any one nation. So that's why we need to balance things out. The most powerful nation apart from the US is Russia. We are on excellent terms with Russia. We need to keep that going. Mr. Modi went to Ukraine at the US's behest. He spoke with Mr. Biden or whoever it was, and then makes sense to speak with Mr. Putin and tell him that, listen, Mr. Putin, we are definitely not going to go against you, and so on and so forth. A bit of balancing, especially for a nation like India, is important. We want a multipolar world. We don't want a unipolar or bipolar world, which will be bad for the entire world. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's why Mr. Modi makes it a point to engage with every one of our important partners, geopolitical partners, on a regular basis. And that's what this was all about. Balancing act. Okay. Vishak Nair says, what are the steps? How can a country become a $20 trillion economy from a $4 trillion economy? Who has the authority to change the systems in a country? Who has the authority to change the system? Whoever is powerful enough to change it. It is not easy to change a system. You need to be tremendously powerful. What does it mean to be powerful? It means you need to have a lot of people who will do whatever you say, who will obey you. So in a democracy like India, even if you have more than 300 seats in parliament, it typically means you got about 30-40% of the vote, which means 60% of the vote at least is against you. That's the kind of system we have. So even if you have 300 plus seats in parliament, you aren't that powerful. People won't obey you. So to be able to change the systems in a country, you need to be that popular, that powerful, that more than half the people of the nation will definitely obey you and do what you say. In that case, you can be in a position to change the systems. Otherwise, nothing will change in India. So that's what it is. Now, how can a country become a $20 trillion economy from $4 trillion economy? How do you become 5 times the size? First of all, it takes time. It'll take decades. Please understand, it'll take decades. Secondly, we have to reform the system, reduce the inefficiencies, cut down on the inefficiencies, the inertia, cut down on whatever alleged corruption exists, and focus manufacturing. Focus on manufacturing. India has to become a manufacturing power. Right now, India is a service-based economy to a large extent. Services, not manufacturing. We export services, IT and whatnot. We have to start exporting goods, which means that we have to start manufacturing stuff. Doesn't matter what you manufacture, but manufacture lots of stuff that people want and people need. And over time, your technological prowess will definitely improve. That's how China did it. When they started manufacturing in the 1980s, they were at a very low level of manufacturing capability. But over the decades, they have improved their technological prowess. Now they're one of the most technological advanced nations in the world. And they've done it by having a clear long-term focus on what technologies they want to acquire, what technologies they want to build upon. And for that, you need a great education system. And they've done that too. They've invested trillions of dollars worth of money into their education system. So we need to have a long-term focus. We need to reform our systems. We need to reform the education. We need to focus on manufacturing and so many other things. And obviously, we have to have good relations with other countries, especially the more powerful countries. We have to have good relations with as many powerful countries as possible and ensure there is no war, any major military conflict over the next 20, 30 years. All of those things you have to do, which means you need to have great leadership. So, yeah, that's how you transform a $4 trillion economy into a $20 trillion economy. Look, if you look at the history of the US over the 20th century, from the 1950s onwards, their economy doubled in size every decade, roughly. Every decade, every 10 years, the economy doubled in size. So if we can achieve that sort of growth, then we could become a $20 trillion economy in less than 30 years, if we can achieve that sort of growth. So right now we're at $4 trillion. if in the next if by 2034 we are at $8 trillion economy, and by 2044 we are a $16 trillion economy, then by 2050 or 2055 we could definitely be a 20 plus $1 trillion economy. So it takes time. It takes a lot of time, but we have to do a lot of things and get a lot of things right for this to happen. So yeah, that's the road ahead if everything goes right for us. Okay. Mm, okay. Editor 47 says, I'm a 10th grader. I want to pursue the humanities as a career, and I don't want to be a liability on my parents where they have to pay my hefty college fees. What path would you suggest me? What I would urge you to ask yourself is, let's say you pursue the humanities as a career, okay? Once you get your degree, what are you going to produce for the country? And what kind of career path do you have going forward once you get your degree? See, generally, every citizen has to be a productive member of society, right? And if you acquire a degree or any skill, it has to produce something which society needs. With a degree in the humanities, that's a sociology or whatever, your degree is relevant and useful if you have a research career and you do some research. But if you don't have a research career and you then what is your degree going to give you that will be productive in life? That is something you have to ask yourself. So what I'm saying is, you have to ask yourself, after you get your degree, what is the kind of career path you want to have? Do you want to be a professor? Do you want to be a university professor, university or college professor? Or do you want to be a researcher somewhere in some institute? Because with a humanities degree, that's what you can do. Or you will have to uh, start a career in some company and acquire skills from scratch, which have nothing to do with the humanities. So that is one thing you have to ask yourself. And secondly, generally, people who have humanities degrees, uh, what's the chance of them getting a great job, a good job, high paying job? I'm not really sure. Um, so what I'm trying to say in this very strange roundabout manner is, humanities are a waste of time, unfortunately. Look, with a degree in the humanities, you're not equipped to produce anything useful for the country and for society. But if that is what you are best at, then you would need, after getting your degree, to pursue a research career or an academic career in order to make use of the degree. So if that's the path that you think is best for yourself, then I would say go for that career. And obviously, if you don't want to be a liability for your parents where they have to pay a hefty college fee, what do you do about that? Then you need to have money of your own, which means you need to do some job, part time or whatever. But in India, you don't have part time jobs and they don't pay really well. So I think until you have a career of your own, you're going to be dependent on your parents. I'm sure there must be some institutions that offer scholarships to students. Do we have that in India? I'm not sure. But the reality is that for most Indian students, you're going to have to depend on your parents as long as you're a student, because you have no job and you no money of your own. The best you can do is that once you have acquired your degree and your education is over, you get a high paying job and hopefully pay back to your parents whatever they spent on your education. That's the best thing. But I am not a big fan of humanities because they produce nothing for the country, actually. Unfortunately, there's so much scope for the humanities in terms of research. India is a potential gold mine for sociological research, etc. But most sociology departments, if not all, don't do any research, and whatever research they do is actually something that is aimed at maligning the country in a variety of ways. So that's the problem. Okay. Ganesh Kumar says, I'm living in Canada for 12 years, seeing a sharp decline of standards, dollar value, healthcare, jobs, and housing. Given the global situation and wars, would you say it's a no-brainer to come back? Yeah, if you look at the situation a decade before today, then Canada was a very enticing place. If for anybody who wanted to move out of India, healthcare and jobs and all that, living standards, quality of life, all that. Today, things have changed significantly. Mr. Trudeau has made a mess of Canada, the economy, and everything overall. The housing crisis is a big problem. Uh, so, for you as an individual, as a person, it's going to be an individual decision, not a global geopolitical decision. That Canada is doing not very great, and there's a war in Ukraine. So, because of that, should I go back to India? No. If you have a good job wherever you are in Canada, it pays you well, and you have reasonably good living standards, then as an individual, it makes sense to stay where you are. And if you have good career prospects in Canada, and you will do better than, let's say, the majority of the population, then it makes sense to stay in Canada on an individual level. Okay, as a purely selfish individual. But if you are being affected by the economic scenario, if you don't have good career prospects, if the amount of money you're earning doesn't give you a good lifestyle, then maybe it makes sense to return to India. As long as you will get a better lifestyle and a better career in India. So you have to weigh up all these possible scenarios and possible outcomes before you make a choice. So I don't think it's a no-brainer. It depends on your specific individual situation. So you're gonna have to calculate these things and arrive at a logical decision based on pure logic and numbers and your future growth path, which you could achieve in this country or that. That's how you make the decision. Okay. Um, Indrajit says nuclear winter. Oof. What would the world be like, and how would people live during nuclear winter hypothetically? So, what's a nuclear winter? So, I'm sure no one remembers it because no one was around, but there was an impact event about 66 million years ago. Okay, the Chicxulub impact event. You want to see where it is? Let me show you. Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico. Here's Mexico, and here is Yucatan. Okay, and if you look at Yucatan, then there is the city of Merida, and there's the town of Chicxulub here. This town, Chicxulub, is roughly the epicenter of that impact event. The impact was an asteroid which slammed into the Earth, and there's this massive underground crater that you can detect if you have the means of doing so. Chicxulub. So that impact event killed off. It triggered a mass extinction on the planet. It killed off the non-avian dinosaurs and lots of other species on the planet. Our ancestors, the little mammals, they survived, which is why we are here. And the avian dinosaurs also survived, which is why we have birds out there. Dinosaurs still exist, they're birds. But the rest of these species went extinct, especially the large ones, the large species, the dinosaurs, big ones. So that's kind of a nuclear winter scenario. So now that we understand that, so what happened when this object, this asteroid, slammed into the planet? Massive explosion, gigantic explosion, millions of times the energy output of the Hiroshima nuclear test, and a tremendous amount of soot, of dust, of carbon, of all that, of vaporized rock, etc., was thrown up into the atmosphere, and it completely shrouded the atmosphere, and there was no sunlight, direct sunlight on the planet for about a decade, roughly, give or take. So when there is no sunlight, plants die, because plants get their energy and food through the process of photosynthesis, which requires light, sunlight. If there is no light, plants die. If the plants die, herbivorous animals die. If herbivorous animals die, the carnivorous animals that eat those herbivorous animals, they also die. So what's left? Only the little beings are able to somehow survive until sunlight returns, and then things go back to over time to normal. A nuclear winter scenario is very similar to that. So how does a nuclear winter happen, and what does it look like? A nuclear winter happens if there is a massive nuclear exchange involving hundreds or thousands of nuclear warheads. So, hundreds or even thousands of nuclear explosions. These explosions will vap- every nuclear explosion on the surface or near the surface, it vaporizes part of the Earth's surface, a small amount of the Earth's surface. It throws up a tremendous amount of debris into the atmosphere, vaporized rock, dust, and all kinds of other very small particles. And if you have thousands of these, or hundreds or even thousands of these, then it will recreate the Chicxulub impact scenario. The whole planet is shrouded in darkness. There is no sunlight for months, even years. What does that do? Very rapid climate change. Very rapid, in like matter of days. All the heat disappears, snow everywhere, ice everywhere, everything is frozen. Most people living in the tropical regions will die in a matter of hours. Those who survive may not last a week or two. Then there is an immediate shortage of food. All your livestock animals start dying. All the trees start dying. All the forests start dying. And then who survives? Maybe 1%, 2% of humanity survives after a month or two, after a year. That is the incredible disaster that a nuclear winter is. How will people live? I wonder how they will live. Everything will be frozen. There'll be no light. There'll be no food sources. Telecommunications gone. Satellites no longer work. Electricity doesn't exist. Communication supply chains all gone. Trade over. Nations no longer exist. Populations decimated. So if anyone survives, it's going to be like 1 or 2% of humanity. It is going to be an extinction event. Most species on the planet of animals, fish, etc., will die out. That is what a nuclear winter is. Maybe humanity could go extinct if this happens. So that is why a nuclear war is an unthinkable disaster. We never want it to happen. That's how bad it is. That's how bad a nuclear winter is. It most likely leads to the extinction of humanity itself. Life will not disappear from the planet. Life will continue. After a year or two, after 5 years, whatever, sunlight returns to the planet, depending on how many nuclear warheads were used, sunlight will eventually return and some life will persist, and then it will start thriving again after decades, centuries, whatever. A new species will emerge. But we who did this most likely won't survive. So that's why, World War III and nuclear war, it's the last thing we want. Last thing we want. It's not a joke. Summer says, what do you think? How will the earth end? Nukes, war, climate disaster, etc. No, you're asking about the end of humanity, not the end of the planet. I'll tell you what is the end of the planet Earth. It's about 5 billion years from now. About 5 billion years from now, roughly, the sun will become a red supergiant. Its outer layers of the sun, the star, the outer layers will expand, expand, expand. The diameter will increase, and eventually the sun, its outermost layers will engulf our planet. And we will become part of the sun, we will become inside the sun. That is what will end the earth. So that is how the earth ends about 5 billion years from now. The real question you're trying to ask is, how will humanity end? I hope it never ends. I hope 5 billion years from now, whatever our descendants look like, they have moved on to a different star system or wherever. But how could humanity end if we are not careful? Definitely nuclear war. If we are not careful, we could trigger nuclear war, which would end humanity. So conventional war could also decimate a large portion of humanity, but I think it's nuclear war that is real danger. Climate disaster, I don't think so. Climate change is a real thing. Of course, it's a real thing. Climate change has always existed. The Earth's climate has always been changing, and today is not different. And some amount of the climate change we are seeing is caused by humanity, no doubt. But I think we will be able to adapt and evolve. In the future, the Earth may get hotter than what it is now, several degrees, which means it will reconfigure the entire geographical dimension of the Earth. Low-lying areas could get swallowed up by the oceans with the rise of the ocean levels and so on. And it will cause a lot of hardship to humanity, but it will not end humanity. Humanity will still continue. It is nuclear war that is the most immediate and most dangerous, the scariest scenario. And of course, pandemics are a real threat, natural or engineered, whatever. And water crisis, etc., health crisis, microplastics in the brain and other tissues and all that. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, especially because of the way we have treated the planet. But I think the scariest scenario that could end humanity is nuclear war, nuclear winter. Which is why I always keep saying we don't ever want to see World War III, which means nuclear war between the most powerful nations. We don't want that. Amrit Singh says, is mathematics invented or discovered? Look, mathematics, what is mathematics? Mathematics is essentially the representation in symbolic language of the patterns and regularities that underlie the universe, the natural world. That's what mathematics is. So there are these regularities and patterns in the natural world, in the universe. And the representation of those regularities and patterns in symbolic language is mathematics. Now, so with that understood, it's clearly something we discover, right? Yes, so mathematics is discovered, but some is invented. For example, if you want to solve certain families of equations, you have to invent new techniques for doing that. So that is invented, isn't it? You have to invent techniques for differentiation, for integration, for solving differential equations, for solving linear equations. All kinds of techniques have to be invented. And you could invent different kinds of techniques to achieve the same end results. So some of it, so those techniques are invented, but mathematics itself is discovered. So it's kind of both. That's how I see it. Deep Ahuja says, to strengthen India's defense, should India acquire the Su-57, Su-57 aircraft, Felon, from Russia, which has better capabilities instead of working on its own AMCA jet, which will take a long time to come in service? Look, if the Sukhoi 57 is really as good as people say, buy a number of those. If we really are pressed for time. But even if we purchase that aircraft, the entire trial process, blah, 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 the bureaucratic red tape procedure will take, I don't know, years. And then once the deal is signed, the Russians will have to produce those aircraft. They also have a requirement for those aircraft. Now, if they have to produce X number of them for India, they have to, that takes time. So the whole process could anyway take a decade. It's not like those aircraft are sitting, are fruits, ripe fruits on a tree. You just go and pluck them off. It's not how it is. And then our wonderful process will say that we have certain specific India-specific requirements for the Sukhoi 57. We want so and so thing and not this thing, and that thing you need to change. And then the process drags even further. So I would say that if we really need a certain number of aircraft very fast, it's fine to buy those. Maybe the Rafale, which is a very good plane, or if you want a better one, and if the Sukhoi is better, 57, then get a number of those, maybe 100, 200, whatever. But we cannot stop working on our homegrown technologies, which is committing metaphorical suicide. We need to, in the long run, be able to produce everything in house, because that's the only way to be genuinely sovereign. If you're depending on other nations for your vital needs and requirements, you are not fully sovereign. It's a question of sovereignty. You lack independence if you're dependent on other nations for these vital needs, because then they can arm twist you. And then they can make you dance to their tunes. I'm not saying the Russians will do that, but why give anybody the opportunity? So we should keep on working on the AMCA jet, on the various variants of the Tejas, on whatever else we're working on, whether people know or not. We should keep working on all those things. We should keep working on the indigenous jet engine technology. But yes, if required, we can purchase a number of aircraft from the French, from the Russians, or whoever, as a stopgap measure, as long as it does not infringe on our sovereignty. You buy things from the Americans, it's gonna poke holes into your sovereignty. So better do it from the French or the Russians. But you cannot compromise on your indigenous programs. We had the Marut fighter plane in the 60s, 70s. We killed it. Our, what's the correct word? Our wonderful, magnificent leaders killed the Marut fighter plane. It was an underpowered fighter plane because it had inferior jet engines. The fighter plane design was superb. If we had not killed off that fighter plane program, by today we would have had a whole family of different kinds of fighter planes based on the Marut, and those aircraft would have been some of the best in the world. So you understand. So today, if we have the Tejas, which is a reasonably good fighter plane, we should continue on that. Tejas Mark whatever, Mark 1, 1A, Mark 2, whatever, and the AMCA, just keep building, keep iterating, keep making better aircraft. It is extremely important, vitally important for our future generations that we have technology of our own, that we don't have to depend on others for. Okay. Where is that? One second. Okay, let's take this one. Feminist Slayer says, is it wrong to take motivation from anime characters when a person doesn't have any role model in your life? Is it good to be selfish sometimes? Look, if you don't have a role model in your life, you can certainly take motivation from your favorite fictional characters. Anime characters are also fictional characters. So I can give other examples. If you there are lots of people who are fans of the Lord of the Rings, and that has many great characters. Aragorn, Gandalf, whatever. Those are not real people. They never existed. But you find those characteristics great. If you find them inspiring, certainly those are archetypes of human traits. You can certainly take inspiration from that. And similarly, you can definitely take motivation, inspiration, whatever, from anime characters if that works for you. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. What you are being inspired by and motivated by is a set of human traits that you find attractive and inspiring, and that certainly can come from a fictional character. So nothing wrong with that. Absolutely none. Is it good to be selfish sometimes? Well, yeah. You you cannot be selfless at all times. It is certainly fine to be selfish. Look, there will be times when people will take advantage of you in life. People will uh, they will exploit you at times. That's the nature of the world. Most people are like that. Okay. um, So you will find yourself in such situations at various points in your life, and at such times it is important to be selfish and put yourself first. And at the end of the day, please realize that the main character in your life is you. Other people will come and go. You will watch Ask Abhijit for, I don't know, whatever number of episodes, and someday you will move on to something else. So the main character in your life is you. Everybody else comes and goes, but you are with yourself forever. So you certainly must put yourself first. If you want to be selfless, first transform yourself into a person of substance, genuine substance. And you cannot do that without placing yourself first for a certain number of years and working on yourself and prioritizing your interests and needs over those of others. And then, when you are a sufficiently significantly substantial person, you can be selfless and you will have a much more impact on the world by waiting until that time. So, it is certainly good to be selfish. Not at times, most times. But then, when you want to be selfless, do be so strategically in a way that genuinely is impactful to the world. Okay, I think we are almost at the end of things. Aryan Knight says, "Do you watch Italian or French movies?" I've seen all kinds of movies. I actually speak French. I understand French, so yeah, I do. These days, I don't watch any movies, unfortunately, but I've seen many French movies. Uh, yeah, one of my favorite actors when I was a kid was Jean-Paul Belmondo. I don't know if he's still alive. Great actor. So I've seen French movies. I've seen some Italian movies. I've seen those 1960s, 70s movies and all. Mm, but these days, I don't watch any. I have no idea what's coming out of France and Italy these days. They used to have great movies back in the day, like before my time. 60s, 70s, etc. Those are classic movies. But these days, I have no idea what's coming out. Hopefully, they're still doing better compared to the rest of the West. Okay. Tanush Banerjee says, "Is it possible that Isaac Newton was referring to Indians when he said, 'I stand on the shoulders of giants'? On the shoulders of giants, because the height of Indians was gigantic up till a few centuries ago. What evidence do we have that Indians were giants, like genuinely gigantic? What evidence do we have? No, if you make a claim that Indians were gigantic until a few centuries ago, what is the evidence? A claim has to be based on evidence. I have personally seen no evidence that Indians were gigantic. I'm aware of skeletons from the Ganga Valley region from about 30,000 years ago, where the average height of the person was about 6 feet tall. But that is not gigantic. That is tall, but reasonably tall. It's not gigantic. Gigantic is like 8, 9 feet tall. There is absolutely zero evidence, hard evidence, of Indians being 8, 9, 10 feet tall. I have not seen a single piece of evidence. So I don't think he was referring to that. Okay. Newton was referring to people without referring to them. Standing on the shoulders of giants means the scientists who came before him and did the groundwork that he used in making his discoveries. That's what he was referring to, most likely. And probably he was making a dig at Robert Hooke, his great rival. There is no portrait that still survives of Robert Hooke. It's because it's because Newton was jealous of Robert Hooke, and he had his portraits removed from the Royal Society and whatnot. Yeah, even great people can be petty at times. Okay, with that done, we're at the end of today's session. Thank you so much for all the questions, and I apologize to all those of you whose questions I could not take. I understand he means Indian scientific knowledge. No, he was talking about gigantic people, and there is no evidence that Newton was referring to Indians, even in the terms of scientific knowledge. Anyway. So thank you so much for your questions. I will take another live stream tomorrow, in which I will take a number of questions from the comments, and then we will do some questions from the live chat as well. So please do come, do participate. Yes, I have seen Gladiator, good movie. All right. So that's it for today. And I will see you in tomorrow's live stream. Thank you so much. And do keep raising your standards at all times. Keep asking questions of me and of yourselves as well. Thank you, and I'll see you in tomorrow's live stream.